so much, everybody. Let's start. Let me introduce all our speakers. I'll start with Dr. Pankaj Sharma, Director Admissions and Outreach, SRM University, Delhi NCR Sonipat. He has 21 years of mixed experience in corporate and education industry. He has worked with NIIT University, BML Munjal University, the Tribune Trust, Dainik Bhaskar Group, Midday,
और
Indian
स्कूल
Express.
हाँ तो ये लीडो लर्निंग का नाम सुना?
हाँ हाँ लीडो
तो
लीडो तो
लीडो जैसा ही
कंटेंट स्टार्टअप है अच्छा
You ask the
अच्छा
question.
खासा तो
Could you mute yourself, please?
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Vaishnavi, please.
Yeah. Midday, Indian Express, HT Media Limited. His area of interest is to conduct career counseling sessions for students and parents. He has good exposure in launching products, and during his corporate journey, he was one of the core team member in launching Hindustan Times in Chandigarh, Hindustan in Meerut City, DNA in Rajasthan, Midday in Delhi, and many more. He has won many awards and recognition during his corporate journey. Next we have is Professor Divakar Shukla. Do we have him? Should I introduce him right now? Or should I wait? Oh, we have him. Right. We have Professor Divakar Shukla, Professor and Dean, Faculty of Journalism and Creative Studies, Head Advancement and International Affairs. Professor Divakar Shukla has more than 2 decades of experience in the fields of social and brand communication, new media technologies, and corporate social responsibility with various premier organizations like World Bank, Netherlands Embassy, along with over 14 years at world's largest communication organization, Ogilvy. He brings with him a deep understanding of the behavior and mindsets of communities and consumers, especially across Asian and Indian culture, and the application of same in the field of social and brand management. Next we have is Mr. Anil Kumar Nair, currently the Director of Admissions at Shiv Nadar University. Mr. Anil Kumar Nair has over 23 years of experience in the education and training domain, including K-12, higher education, vocational training, and skill development. He is responsible for establishing and executing a merit-based admission process that provides equal opportunity to every aspirant committed to learning and finding his or her place in the university. Mr. Nair draws from his vast experience over the years in top organizations such as Citibank, NIIT, Ec Council, and Tata BSS. Next we have is Dr. Alka Mahajan, who has done her graduation in electronics and electrical engineering from Andhra University College of Engineering, Voltaire in 1983, and then her post-graduation leading to MTech in electronics design technology from CEDTI Aurangabad. She subsequently did her PhD from Delhi College of Engineering, Delhi University in Electronics and Communication Engineering in the broad area of soft computing. Dr. Mahajan has over 32 years of teaching experience and has guided a number of undergraduate and postgraduate projects with a number of publications in national and international journals and conferences to her credit. She is currently from NMIMS University. And last but not the least, we have Professor Atul Khosla, a die-hard socialist. Atul is on a mission to change lives. He is the founder and pro-vice chancellor of Shulni University, one of India's leading research-centric private universities. His involvement in Shulni is irreplaceable. He brings out-of-the-box thinking to the field of education. He drives new initiatives at Shulni, starting innovative academic programs, transforming a traditional system through new methodologies of pedagogy, incorporating skills-based curriculum, and building one of the India's most cutting-edge education technology platform. A BTech from IIT Kanpur and an MBA from JBI MS Mumbai, he has been forging partnerships with industries and top global universities. His strong values, substantial experience, and sheer energy have taken Shulni from strength to strength. I welcome you all, and we have Parikshit sir also. We all know him. We have all the ICC participants. He will be actually moderating the entire panel discussion. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vaishnavi, and thank you for the introductions. And I once again invite and welcome all my panelists on behalf of the ICCC community. Dr. Alka, Professor Atul, Dr. Pankaj, Professor Divakar, Mr. Anil, welcome, a very warm welcome to this panel discussion. Dear participants, just for our comfort, we will be addressing each other by our first names. So that'll be easy for all of us. All right, great. Now, the topic is the changing face or the changing landscape of higher education in the country. Now, since yesterday, we've been talking about school education and a little bit about higher education also. Let's look at, before I ask the first question to my panelists, last 10 years, I would say, it's not just 10 years, there has been a revolution brewing all across, but last 10 years, there's been a sea change as far as higher education is concerned. Almost doubling up of universities and then STEM programs, non-STEM, and there are, I would say, thousands of changes across the domain. A lot's been talked about the demographic divide of India, or the demographic advantage, so to say, where we are today almost number 4 as far as number 3 or number 4 as far as higher education is concerned. This will be after US, China, and one more, right? We should be number 4 right now. So when we talk about higher education, what is changing? Right from the schooling system, the intake of students, to when we talked about that there were only one method, which is class 12th marks, and then you would go to higher educational institutions or entrance exams. And then we are also looking at not only profile based, but a lot of very different selection process. Not only that, during the course of the discussion, we'll be looking at different aspects. Number 1, we'll be looking at what is changing as far as higher education is concerned. Number 1. Number 2, how does the future look like? How would NEP bring about changes, right? That will also be one little part that we'll touch. And we'll also talk about post-COVID, how does the higher education system, how has it been impacted? So we'll try and cover all these points within a short period of time. My first question, and Alka, I'm starting with you. My first question is, how do you see higher education changing during the last 1 decade, please?
Well, good evening, everybody, my fellow panelists, as well as the participants. First of all, let me thank Parikshit for having invited me here. It's a pleasure being here amongst the august gathering of experts and the participants who come from various fields and are themselves accomplished people. Yeah, coming to the question as to how do I see the change? For that, if we go back to the 80s, early 80s, I think the landscape started changing when privatization of education started. And it was not in sheer numbers. The numbers, of course, increased. But I think the change started happening because the private players felt the need to be relevant. And for that, they needed to think differently. They needed to think of programs which would attract students. They needed to give something different to the students, to the general populace, to prove themselves. And I think to even survive in this competitive education field. Another factor which I believe brought in a major change was computerization, bringing computers to the classroom and of course the internet. So teachers were forced to reinvent themselves. They had to compete with the best across the globe. Information was at the fingertips of the students. MOOCs brought another revolution. So with MOOCs came in professors from MITs and Cambridge and Harvard. And so the teacher as such had to reinvent himself or herself. We also started talking about course objectives. We started talking about outcome-based education. We started talking about assessment of learning. All these were things that were not really imagined in my days. And this major change, I think, started changing the landscape more. And what I see in the future is these changes getting more structured and becoming the new normal. I think we are moving towards more freedom and flexibility in terms of giving choice to students, in terms of cutting down or diminishing boundaries between the various disciplines. I see classrooms becoming more interactive and open, teachers stepping down from their so-called pedestal and becoming partners in learning. And I think that is the way to move forward. And of course, the pandemic has proved that online education is here to stay.
Wow, wow, that was quite comprehensive. Anil, over to you to continue.
Hi, thanks Prakshit again for inviting me here, and I thanks to all the participant here and my co-panelists here. So I would agree to Dr. Alka, what you mentioned, the change we have seen is post 1980. I will add probably when we see the globalization happen, and with the erasing of the social barrier, cultural barrier, what we had because of this overall, and the world become the global village. Okay, and definitely technology plays a very important aspect to it. Now what we have seen, the overall education landscape has diversified in a bigger chunk and bigger numbers, from a typical a jacketed programs. We have seen it, the typical universities programs which has been giving a predefined curriculum, and we all know that we will discuss NEP coming after how many years. Okay, so the privatization of universities coming up, okay, that is basically truly sense we had a huge manpower, or we have a huge student base to cater, and we cannot alone leave to government sectors to come up, and that's the reason this privatization has come up. Now my thought would be little different, like we have seen these changes and all, but I still feel there is a lot of ground still need to be covered if we really see where we stand. As you mentioned, Prashit, we are probably the third or the fourth largest in higher education after the US and China. Our gross enrollment ratio is still hovering around 25-26%, which is quite below than what is the developing nations or a developed nations coming up. We still need to cover up a ground on changing the landscape from I'm talking about K-12 and higher education, the road-based learning which has come up, but I'm not sure whether it has been taken in all sectors. That's basically coming. We talk about certain parameters like faculty teaching ratios. Where are we right now? Okay, so if you see the developing country like 12:1 and all, we still have at least I see 30:1. Okay, so and second, the other attributes to this is like research focus. So I appreciate the new age university like Shivnada, Noni, and other my peer level universities coming up and all. So how much is actually is being devoted in terms of these 4, 5, 6 parameter I'm talking about in terms of a higher education landscape. So let's say our contribution in terms, I think, is 0.6 to 0.8% of the GDP overall. That is the only research funding what we are doing, which is compared to, even if you take Israel, which is 4.2. Again, if you take Korea, which is again 4%, which is a quite large. So just changing with the technology and the curriculum or NEP, I'm saying, okay, this is a great vision. We still need to cover up a lot of ground. Okay, so we probably I'm seeing this some key parameters which we need to check and definitely move forward. But yes, there is a great trajectory. I think the importance of private sector coming up here, it's a great deal, and I see this will grow more due to this disruptive world which is coming up. The population of the 18 to 23 bracket youngster is almost more than 150, and what a recent study I was doing, it opened up the new funding foreign investment in the private sector, and NAP is probably creating that route of the joint education funding from some other university. I think that's a great move which I feel.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. Pankaj, I'll move to you for your opening remarks, please.
I think, first of all, good evening to all the participants and Parikshit, and thank you, Mindler, to have this kind of a platform, and good evening to all the co-panelists. If you talk about the change in the higher education, I remember when I was in my class 12 long back, and I just want to have one word when we, it's not change in the system, it is when you enter into the system, like the admission process and the delivery and the finally placement. So there's a change across. I remember when I was in class 12, we used to go to banks and not to take the money, to take the application form for the particular college or the university. So that kind of a trend, now everything is online. And then as Anil said, technology is really brought a lot of change in the system. We have students from, like at SRM University, we are getting students from all these states. And we realize that when we are getting students from various states, they have a different kind of exposure. in education, what I felt, there are three important things. That's why education is important, and especially higher education, because it's a transition between the school and the corporate. That's very important. When student is coming of 14, 15 years of education in the school, and it's a transition platform, because corporate has a different kind of expectation nowadays. They believe that students should come from the university and start working from the very first day. So that is very important, the expectation from the corporate. In higher education, we have to make sure that there are three important things. One is the body, mind, and heart. I think we have to bring together. That's very important when we talk to the student while when they are studying in the university like SRM University, where we have a very strong connect with the industry. What I have seen, I started my journey in higher education in 2012 with NIT University. I also worked with Dry Foundation for a couple of months. The major change in the technology, the major change in the expectation, and there's a very strong connect with the industry. And I have also seen there are many schools, they're very proactive. They're inviting universities, they're calling university, and they are saying, we want to send our student to the university, not for a single day. We want they should stay in the hostel. So that change is there, and we are really, I think, and this is a very positive change in the higher education system. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll go over to you, please, for your opening remarks.
So you want me, Deva?
Yes. Atul, you. Yeah.
Hi. So good evening, everyone. And, there's so many luminaries here. I'm getting sweaty palms, which normally I don't get, Parikshit. So I'll try to answer this question. I've always been a contrarian, and hopefully you'll appreciate my views. I don't think much has happened, honestly. There's been changes on the surface. And let me explain. First, there's been a deeper and a wider reach of universities and colleges and institutes. So from 5 IITs in my days, they're now probably 20 plus. I don't know the last count. IIMs have gone up. So the government has sizably broadened the amount of institutions that existed. But I think the biggest change has been the number of private universities and the capacity that has come up in the education sector. And I think many of them have done extremely well. So many of these new age private universities are revamping pedagogy, bringing in technology, doing a lot of research, bringing in new programs, and I think that's really good. What's also happened, I think, on the private university side is also the changing face of promoters from real estate and politicians and sometimes halwais. Increasingly, there are professionals and educationals coming into higher education. We've got serious corporates like Shiv Nadar, who've invested very sizably in a not-for-profit way to build educational institutions. So you'll see many, many more not-for-profit universities coming up. Shiv Nadar, Shulini, many of us are not-for-profit. But still, like I said, the changes on the surface. I remember when I went to IIT, I don't think much has changed the way things are being taught. Yes, we are using a bit of technology here and there. Like I said, yes, we are bringing in a different form of pedagogy here and there. We brought in a bit of skill, but we have not really disrupted anything. And I think what's going to happen in the next 10 years, Parikshit, is a major disruption. And I'll give some statistics over here. And I'll ask this question to all educators. It's a basic economics question. Go back and check the capacity utilization of a standard lab or a classroom in your university or in your school. And mind you, capital or money is the same whether you put it in manufacturing or you put it in universities or schools or anywhere in the world, which basically means you need to sweat your capital 24/7, 365 days. That's the way manufacturing companies run. That's the way TCS runs. That's the way Maruti runs, right? Universities run 200 days a year, 8 to 5 p.m. Some might stretch to 7. So the average capacity utilization when you look at 24/7, 365 days is probably 5%. The point I'm trying to drive, Parikshit, is all educational institutions across the world are extremely inefficient. And this has to change. It cannot be academic inflation going up and up and up. If I could get my Haldiram chips at 15 rupees today, which was 15 rupees 10 years ago, there's no reason why my fee structures should keep going up. So there's going to be a phenomenal change that's happening, that's going to happen. So disruptive universities will come up, and big fat universities that existed in the past are going to fail. And let me build my case over here, Parikshit. There was a reason why we had Oxford or universities like Harvard with huge campuses, because to create knowledge, we had to get lots of people together to create knowledge. And the only way to get those people together was to build large campuses. Today, we don't need to do that. We've got technology like what's we're doing today. So I can build a university which is very different. I can build hub and spokes. Why should someone from Arki come all the way to Shiv Nadar to study? I mean, I ask this fundamental question. Why should not there be a small center of Shulini over there, right? So that's one big fundamental change that people will be asking. How are universities structured? And can they deliver at 1/10 the cost of what they're delivering?
Okay.
And that's the challenge for us. The second challenge is going to be, who said that there would be 3 and 4 year degree programs? Who defined it? I mean, God didn't come and tell us that 3 years is going to be a BSc program. We defined it because the programs are driven around the Industrial Revolution, something that Oxford and Harvard did 300, 400 years ago. The world is changing. We are sitting in digital revolution right now. Our competition as higher education players is not going to be amongst us. It's going to be new age players which are going to come and disrupt. And we will have to disrupt ourselves if we have to compete with them when the Baijus of higher education will come and knock at our doors. So that's the second thing. Is there going to be a fundamental change in the way degrees shape? Why should someone not spend 6 months at Shulini, 6 months at Shiv Nadar, 6 months at Narsi Monji? The new education policy anyway is talking about that. So that's, I think, another thing. So if I'm an educator or I'm a student, in school especially, I need to make sure that my students are flexible enough for this big change. I think the third thing which is going to happen is a very deep induction of research into universities, especially in India. Most Indian universities do not do research, full stop. Whether we believe it or not, agree on it or not, that's the fact, Parikshit. That's why Indian universities lag in international rankings. Look at THE, look at QS, Indian universities are nowhere. And we can have a long chat on that. So research will become a deep focus for Indian universities going forward because we live in a very competitive world and we want to give back to the community. And lastly, every university should focus on giving back to the community. Stanford gives back to the Silicon Valley. We have the New Jersey corridor because of Princeton. The manufacturing corridor of China was built by Tsinghua University. So each universities will start building these ecosystems around themselves and give back to nation building. So big changes going to happen in the next 10 years. And that's what excites me, Parikshit. We are going to create the next wave of knowledge workers in the world. And if we can do that, India will regain its presence in the world. That's what I believe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Atul. That was you've given us a lot of points to talk about. Thank you. Diwakar, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Parikshit. And it's really good to, kind of listen to, all the panelists and I'm sure that Parikshit, you come up with some very profound thoughts as well. I was kind of listening to what Dr. Mahajan said and Professor Khosla recently. I totally echo what they said essentially. And what Professor Khosla was saying recently, he was talking about the transformation part of it. And we all agree. In fact, everybody out here who's there on this particular session agrees that the knowledge society that we are in and the way that it is changing requires a different kind of complementary skills to the world that we are going to step into. And very recently, actually, Parikshit, I was talking to somebody, because every session, everywhere, this COVID questions and question marks comes up. And my kind of response to that has been, while it is a very, very serious and obviously pushing back kind of a scenario, is that the pandemics have been there in the past. The pandemics are happening right now, and it would also happen in the future. Because as Mr. John Vidal, who's the world's biggest environmental journalist in Guardian, he had written that If we cut the forest and we cut the trees and biodiversity zones, where's the virus going to go? Because virus stays in the animals. So they need to find another set of host. And invariably, it's the humans who become the host. So that story would continue. But coming back to the education part of it, I think it's very, very important that universities today is standing at the crossroads, essentially, if you ask me. So what Professor Khosla does, that's why I was, kind of listening to him very intently, is saying that we need to transform, number one. There is a huge amount of optimization which has to happen now. And when I say optimization, it is not only an economics question, but also very larger piece of, kind of a question that we need to think. I have seen university whether we need to be reactionary to things which are happening, but as universities always, and this time NEP tries to define universities in slightly more evolved way, whether universities, if we are institutions of reflection, we need to be slightly more proactive and progressive. And if we just take this world of being proactive and being progressive, I think what Professor Khosla was saying, trying to give it back to the society, trying to build up a huge amount of research, trying to look at things which are going to happen in the future. That's why the content today would be decided basis what jobs are going to be in the future, which are not even existing as of now. I mean, these are the questions which should be which should be tackled as of now. My point is that while research is absolutely important, I think we also need to understand how and why research happens or why it does not happen. Because there's an ecosystem that we need to build up as a society for research to happen. So like NEP says, there is a research intensive universities and there is a teaching intensive universities. So universities would have to take a call whether which area they want to go. And in case if we say that research, which is critical for any good university to have, then we'll have to invest a lot in terms of how these faculty and scholars going to, bring up that particular piece of research. Because you cannot give them huge amount of load factors to the faculty, young and senior, and expect them to churn out great Scopus-led research is happening. So I think there are questions which are in front of us. I feel, and being an eternal optimist, things are changing, but somehow the place is so slow that we are unable to see where the changes are happening. And that's why these seminars and webinars and getting together of people is very interesting, is because the time has come now where the benchmark and the best practices need to be shared. Because so far, as I think somebody was talking about the private universities coming to play, the state government universities, central government universities, I think, we have been too much trying to fight out the spaces, geographical spaces. I do not think that's going to happen. If you have a knowledge piece, if you have a content piece, which you're going to give it back for the society and for the students, I think the collaborations needs to start happening on a larger, scale. So that way, I totally accept what, Professor Khosla said it in the end and Mahajan ma'am started initially. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. You know what? I thought that you guys, all of you will give me opening remarks, but you've also taken it, there have been few radical statements also being made, contrarian, you could say. And also, to the effect that we've already talked about 3-4 questions that I wanted to share with you. Moving on to a very important piece, all right? Because I understand that we are moving. However, the pace may not be as we would like to be. My question is, student is at the center of education, right? All of you, the core area is student, right? Now, my question back to Alka, back to you is, what are the amazing options that today's students have in all your universities, right? So all the 5 of you who are sitting here, my question is going to go to, what are the amazing things that have happened or are happening for a student? You muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Parikshit, I do agree with what you just said, that student is the center of all that we do and we propose to do. But is it really, do we really have the student in the center? Let us be, all of us sitting here today and the participants, let us be honest to ourselves. Do we really consider the student and what he wants, what he or she wants? Is the student the center of our so-called educational universe? I'm sorry to say, the student is not. The poor guy is far, far removed from what we actually dump on him. But thankfully, things are changing. Yes, the pace is slow, but I'm happy that there has been a beginning somewhere, that was important. Because I go back to my student days and I find that I just went through the process of becoming an engineer, doing my engineering, and after that my postgrad, then my PhD, and really not into it, I would say. So your very basic premise that student is the center is itself wrong. So the first thing all of us need to do is bring him bang into the center once again. Not once again, for the first time, I guess we should think of bringing the student in. And that means that, unfortunately, and I don't blame the system as such, because traditionally we are a society where a child is not really expected to think or have a mind of his own. If we go back to our days, all of us sitting here, we kind of fell into the careers that we find ourselves today. It could be peer pressure, it could be family pressure, it could be something the teacher expected out of you, or you thought that it was the right thing to do. But we never really had a mind of our own. Maybe there are always exceptions, 10%. But then if you look at the general populace, people just do what they are expected to do from others. Thankfully, things are changing. If I look at the student of today, I feel he or she knows their mind. They definitely know where they want to be, what they want to do. And that is thanks to the globalization or the world that is brought to their fingertips via the internet. So the students are very well aware of the options that they have. They have a mind of their own, and thankfully the parents have started accepting that fact. I see so many parents who have now accepted that, okay, if the child does not want to get into engineering, he is left alone. He is allowed to explore his interest, and that is a very positive sign. And as education providers, I think it's a very important development for us, because that tells us that we no longer need to stick to a standardized education delivery system, but we need to make it flexible. We need to make it more choice-based, and we need to really analyze what the student of today wants. And we need to see that our system gives them the options that they look forward to. Okay. So it's we could, I mean, the interdisciplinary thing, multidisciplinary thing that the new education policy is talking about, it would really bring the desired results if all of us basically change our mindsets.
Okay. Okay.
As education providers, the first thing which we need to do, starting from the promoters to the parents to the teachers to the administrators, we need to change our mindsets. We need to be more open to the needs of the student and put the student back in the center. I think that is where the change would start. Okay. And that would be a change which would be sustained.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. Anil, I'm coming back to you. As Alka talked about, that do we actually have the student at the center? All right. So I'm rephrasing that question. Okay. I would so want to believe that student is the focus and is at the center. All right. I just so want to believe. Anil, tell me how, when Alka and I and all of us were growing up, to the student who's now ready to come to your university. All right. Is there any change? And if yes, what are the areas? Quick word from you. What are the areas where they have the change?
Okay. So Prakshit, I think I would like to say one thing and probably shout out the vision of our founder, Mr. Shiv Nada, taking a philanthropic initiative. And there was a great amount of, I say effort has gone. And I always believe, I think the founders and the institute always, remains ahead of the curve, whenever we decided. So whatever we are talking about multidisciplinary, the choice-based question, what student want, there is a social pressure to do a program versus aspire to do, my aspiration is to do. So that has changed. And since our establishment 2011, I think we were in a real sense, the torchbearer of the multidisciplinary education system. And if you see our tagline, which very clearly say, we are the multidisciplinary research oriented, a student centric university when you say.
Okay.
So just a key highlight how it happens. I'll tell you this, as Dr. Alka already mentioned. Look, you've been chosen PCM as a subject in 12th. Okay. You've been forced, I think 90% of the students would be forced to take an engineering. And we know why, because every parents look for a great career. And then we have top IITs, it's there, you go there, and probably post that you have to do MBA and like that. But anybody thought of that and all? Probably in case of, I say, Dr. Alka, she actually very, very, what you call fond of physics as a subject. Does she had a choice that point of a time that she can pursue at least something in the physics other than the chapters, which is a part of engineering? That's all? No, not at all. So again, I'm saying we were actually, being confined to a jacketed program, but today that has been evolved, which I think we have taken the lead in that. It's a T-based, T-shaped education. So not only the depth, but breadth of the thing. So at our place, as you said, the 12th student is coming. They have a choice to do major and minor.
That's
So
right.
let's say I'm again taking doctor's case here, Akash. So she could have taken, BTech in electronic engineering, what she has done, and minor probably the passionate subject called physics. So she could have done BSc, minor in BSc research physics. Or it could be simply that she is still a science student, but very good in literature. Okay. So can a student do it any other environment? No. And we all have seen this moment has really helped us. So we believe, like as a statement, I'm saying we have moved, more forward from STEM education. We have added one more A, which is basically arts and design. Okay, so
Right.
that's a kind of opportunity, and that's the reason I said student is the centric. They can choose what they want in terms of, and that was the vision of the founders there way back. Western University, we know the world has already moved into that. It's not that you have to fixed program, but they can choose and pick. And we have seen at the end, they do well in their career. And we have a lot of examples and all quoted. We have seen it's like a POC, proof of concept, where we've seen they're done fantastically well. So for us, student centric definitely and all. And it implies that a student of what do you call science student, specifically, let's say BSc physics is doing, he might have an interest to learn more on data analytics. He might want to learn in little bit of economics just to understand, to demystify the real impact of the issues like GST, like that. So there's an options available, which I'm saying. So that's the way I'm saying we at least is really focused on student-centric approach.
Perfect. Pankaj, I'll come back to you. There's a follow-up question to what Anil talked about. Now, so he's saying now when we're looking at, and of course, Alka would also agree, but she made a very valid point. Okay, very valid point that the premise is student the center, is student the focus. Now, my question to you, a follow-up question is, what about industry academia partnerships? All right. What about industry relevant programs? So how is that a positive change from a student's perspective? Please throw some light on that.
I think that's a very important and very valid point when we're talking about the industry partnership. And we have at SRM University Sonipat at various levels. First of all, in the curriculum, that's the way what is required in the industry. For example, we have a tie-up with IBM, TCS, Xebia, KPMG, and recently we have a tie-up with Siemens. We have a Center of Excellence.
Okay.
So that's really missing, because if you see the newspaper also almost 2-3 years back, even right now also, there's a lot of gap what is required in the industry and what we are teaching. I'm not saying we as a SRM, but obviously as in all the higher education institute, there's a lot of gap. So what intervention we have, one is the curriculum, then we have subject matter expert, they're coming from the industry, particular industry, they are spending time, they're teaching our students. Apart from that, there are a lot of projects, because I think without research, you cannot do. If you just copy things, what I have seen in some universities and some colleges, students just copied things. I don't want to take the name of the university, but the research, in-depth research. For example, if you want to go for a computer science engineering, I always ask students, why computer science? They said, because my cousin has done computer science and he got a job in US. That's the reason I want to do that. I think research start from the opting for the career. So that is the industry also help when we take students, some of the experts from the IBM, TCS, Xebia, or KPMG, they are involved. Like tomorrow we have one session where the person from the KPMG interacting with the students those who have not taken decision as of now. So
Okay.
industry plays a lot of role in terms of, because the first question which came during the counseling, sir, what about the placement?
I
And
get it.
obviously, when you are doing a higher education, you have three options after that. First is the job, which is almost approximately 85% students are opting for the job. And the second is the higher education, which is research and all. And third option is startup. I think where higher education institute have to do a lot of effort, and they have to take input from the corporate, where we have to work so hard in terms of startups.
Okay.
So that way, we have just created a platform, and I believe that as far as student centric point is concerned, as Dr. Alka said, I really agree that whatever we design, it is based on the student centric, but we are also have a lot of obligation from UGC, AICTE. If we want to change something, we cannot do that. I think that kind of a freedom as all higher education should have. And there are a lot of new universities, I will say new age universities. They have done a lot of innovations and they are reflecting in the student. So that way, I think we have to really do a lot of efforts. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Perfect. Atul, I have a very specific question for you. You know, as Pankaj talked about industry readiness programs and of course industry and academia partnership. My question to you would be, how do we strike a balance between learning and employment readiness? And that's my specific question to you, because I think both are classic goals for a university, right? So learning on one side and employment ready. What's your take on that?
Parikshit, I'm going to go back with my contrarian views, and I hope next time you'll invite me to your panels, right? I have a very different view about the world. My belief is that universities are not set up to give skills. Universities are way bigger than that. When I went to IIT, for example, I might not have learned engineering. People ask me, how much engineering did you learn? I say this much. You can interpret whichever way you want. But I did learn problem solving. I learned leadership. I learned communication. I learned team collaboration. I learned life skills and lots of other things. So I'll step back to my McKinsey days and Oliver Wyman days. And I did a huge amount of recruiting at that point of time. I probably would have hired more than 1,000 people across different and best practice institutes of India. What would best practice consulting firms, the most cutting edge consulting firms of the world look at? They probably look at four things. First, problem solving ability, thought leadership. Can this person solve problems, whether he knows about that subject or not? Throw him into something and he or she will be able to solve it. Secondly, is this person a good team player and is able to communicate his or her thoughts? Very, very important. Thirdly, does this person have the ability to lead teams? Can this person lead new initiatives if given, and with quality? And finally, values. And sometimes we forget that in the whole scheme of things. Does this individual have the right set of values to ensure that the work is on time, but more importantly, within the values of the organization? I believe that's the role what universities have to do. As far as skills are concerned, as far as employability skills are concerned, if you have given these four edge high-level thoughts to your students, they will be employable. The fundamental question, Parikshit, we have to ask ourselves is, are we preparing robots who will become screwdriver experts and will be on the lowest part of the knowledge value chain? Or do we want to rule the world? Do we want to create entrepreneurs, scientists, people who go out and create things and not just do things? So that's the first thing. So how do we sort of blend the two together? I think, of course, knowledge is very important. But I think more than that, what we are trying to do at Shulini is to bring in what I call transdisciplinary learning. I'll give a couple of small examples over here. Okay. We were trying to do a course on artificial intelligence. And normally you'll teach artificial intelligence to computer science students. We said, let's do it differently. Let's actually get computer science students and MBS together into the class. The answer is very simple, because that's the way industry works. The challenge is that engineers don't know anything about business and business guys don't know anything about technology. So we said, let's do it differently. We'll do a course in AI where both of them study the same course together. Very revolutionary. We were trying to teach GDP, for example, and I did this experiment in COVID days. I was just trying to explain GDP. What is GDP to my students of economics? And the topic I gave to them was go to your nearest mohalla and find out the GDP of the market that you reside in. So transdisciplinary learning will become the norm of the day. And I think 3-4 things which I think have been spoken about. You students are very lucky. I think the audience is school educators. You're very lucky because all new age universities will bring in liberal arts into education. They'll bring reading, writing, reasoning into their education. They'll bring in technology into education. So we are very bad at technology as in general. I'm talking about universities compared to the industry. Okay. I think we need to bring in huge amount of analytics and artificial intelligence. So that's going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. A lot of flexibility of major, minors. Anil spoke about that. So I could be starting with aerospace like I started. I could end up with literature and music. I think we've already implemented that at Shulini many, many years back. Things should become cheaper. I spoke about that. So as a student, things will become cheaper. The last thing is research, Parikshit. So what we are trying to do is to bring deep research to undergraduate students. We think the learning is very, very exceptional when you bring in research. And by the way, UG students blow us away. The QS rankings just came about for Asia 3 days back. And I'm so proud to say that a very small university like Shulini is now 38th in the country and in the top 300 in Asia. But more importantly, in citational research, we are number 1 in the country, way ahead of everyone else. And it's happened with the students. We don't have too much money like Shiv Nadar. They've got very deep pockets. We are very small. I've been through a small IPO, but very small compared to them. But it's the passion of the students that takes it around. So I think if we can do these things and students start using their mind and become leaders, they will become employable. They will create new entrepreneurial ventures. And like I always say, India will become a richer, happier, and better country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Diwakar, I have another very specific question, just like I asked Atul also. My question to you is, I got to know that your university has kind of moved away from STEM programs, right? So my question is, is that a conscious choice, or do you see non-STEM courses the norm on the future, or majority of students moving that way? Why have you moved that way is my question.
Okay, so yes, that's a fact that while technology is very important, and we do have a very robust technology department in the school. That's definitely there. But as a direction, we somehow feel, and this is really what comes to the fore, is that definitely non-STEM, or like Anil mentioned about STEAM as well. I mean, adding art to the entire mix of things definitely is the future. But as I answer that thing, I just want to dwell a second more on what Professor Khosla said. It's very important. And Parikshit, you started talking of the student centricity of the entire universities. Essentially, universities work for, I mean, on one side you have its stakeholders, which are scholars and faculty members and everybody else, but primarily it's the students' work. So whichever university has not been able to, kind of keep their North Star of the students, I think is missing a big point, number one. Number two, I think it is very, very important that as a university, we should be exposing our students, whether UG or PG, to the complexities of the world. I have often seen many times, the universities or the classes or programs become kind of a bubbles. Every good thing happens, and that's where, like Dr. Sharma was talking about, there's a disconnect between the industry, real world, and the education. I think the students should be encouraged to embrace complexity and then simplify it to a large extent. A lot of depression, a lot of confusion, chaos happens is when we are unable to kind of embrace complexity. And Professor Khosla is absolutely right. Look at how complexity is embraced by the corporate world or by the industry in different areas, and they are able to move ahead. So that's I would want to say. Second point I would want to say as I answer your key question, Prakshit, is that the pedagogy and the techniques and the systems and the ecosystem within the universities should ensure that we are able to affirm the students, which essentially means that everything that we do as a part of a pedagogy, learning content, everything should not be a hindrance to the learning part. Because we have been talking of knowledge and learning, we're not only talking of curriculum completions and those things, we're talking of larger things. So I totally agree to what Professor Khosla said in a general sense. Having said that, as Jharkhand Lake State University, it's been about 7 years that we have came into being in terms of as a university. And without, sounding too bragging from that aspect, in Central India, we have been able to do a lot of good work. And in 7 years, I see the students who have graduated, alumni, and including the current students, making a mark in the spaces that they are studying. Why has that happened is because we have really consciously thought of that as the students study the base core areas of their disciplines, they should also be able to understand the larger space of art and culture and those things as well. Da Vinci years back actually had said something very interesting, and something I'm pretty sure that he was approved something, was he said that, study the science of art, or rather study the art of science as well. So at that point of time also, he was trying to merge the things together. In the fourth industrial revolution that everybody's talking about, it is absolutely imperative that students and scholars and faculty members are able to adopt the non-STEM perspectives as well. In my personal opinion, in my personal experience as well, many times when the students come to the university, they are very, very bright, they're very sharp. What is missing, and that is what puts many times people back, is this what I call as a perspectives. Because somehow the perspectives, if they are built up into the context of it, then every subject would become relevant to them, and they'll see the applicability and deployment of that subject in the real world. And that's why, as Jharkhand Lake State University, we really, really firmly feel that non-STEM, or I may use the word again, what Anil said, STEAM, works very well for the future. But I'm not trying to, put down technology as not being effective enough or not being.
I get it. Oh, that's understandable. Alka, I'm coming back to you. I'm sorry we are short on time, so I have another 2 set of questions, and we'll have to be very quick with our responses, each one of you. My question is now we've all been hit by COVID, okay, and it's been what, more than 8 months. So from an equity, inclusion, from a selection, from a recruitment strategies, admissions, I'm putting all those questions together. How is it impacting higher education?
Well, to be slightly optimistic, I would say that I really shouldn't say it, but the pandemic appears to have been a kind of blessing in disguise, because it has made us rethink our strategies. I think we had become a bit complacent, and I would say that we really did not feel, though the net was there, the technology was there, the online forums were there, we were not really taking advantage. And I do not mean individually as NMIMS, but this pandemic kind of forced us to think on our feet. But when you talk about equity or inclusion, I think we need to tread a bit cautiously, because just talking about equity or inclusion and saying that it was there would be fooling ourselves. Because more than, forget about the major cities, but everywhere else there is a problem of power outages, there is a problem of connectivity, there is a problem of Wi-Fi and the bandwidth and things like that. So assuming that everything is perfect on the other side is a fallacy. So somewhere we need to think of those issues when we are talking about equity and accessibility. But at the same time, I would say as a nation, we have really coped up well and fast enough to see that the infrastructure is in place, and majorly students, schools, higher education institutes have been able to cope up. So that's a very big plus. If I come specifically to NMIMS, that's my university, I would say that we were way ahead of times. I mean, even before things could really shape up, we knew where things were going. And we took advantage. We finished the term in time. All our admissions starting from UG to PhD were conducted in time online. And not only that, all our the last academic semester ended on time. The next semester began on time. Examinations were conducted online. Classes were conducted online. And we are beginning our next semester tomorrow.
Oh, lovely, lovely.
So we have, I think, pretty well coped up. And I think that is where the USP of NMIMS comes in. You know, I would consider, because you mentioned at the beginning as to what would I consider the USP of my university. And I think the best way that I can consider that is at NMIMS, we have always been kind of in tune with the changing times. We were the first to introduce a technology management program way back in 2004, realizing that engineers needed to have that management background, because willy-nilly later in corporate life, they have to get into administrative and managerial positions. So our program today is the most sought after program, both by the students as well as the industry. Even before data science was a buzzword as it is today, we were the first to start a MTech in data science way back in 2015, and the postgraduate program in artificial intelligence in 2018. Not only that, even before the IITs could think of it, we were the first in the country to start a BTech program in data science way back in 2017. And our first batch would be graduating today. When it comes to industry partnerships, or as my co-panelists were talking about, bringing the humanities element into engineering, we have been doing that since ages. We have brought in humanities component, be it critical thinking, as Atul was saying, critical thinking, design thinking, Indian culture, the impact of cinema on society, on education system, all these humanities components were brought in. Not only that, we offer a number of value-added programs from the online giant Coursera. We have a partnership with them, with IBM, we also offer SaaS courses to our students, which are embedded into the curriculum. Okay. So yes, we are there from the beginning, I would say. And I think the major factor that all of us need here to consider, because all of us come from good universities, forward-looking universities, and we have been offering diversity. What I meant by student centricity, I think somewhere I was misunderstood. Student is the center from our perspective. We give so many offerings in terms of multidisciplinary opportunities, humanities, bringing into various disciplines and things like that, combining disciplines. But do we give that kind of time and flexibility to the students? Is it available, basically?
Absolutely.
We may think. So I was basically meaning that it is a one-sided thing that when we make policies or when we offer our offerings, various multidisciplinary offerings, we need to take care of that.
Absolutely.
We need to move to a flexible system where we need to give time to a student to take advantage of the flexibilities and freedom that we are out to offer.
Completely.
Yes. Yeah, and I would also say that this year we are starting the MBA in digital transformation. So that's a program I am really looking forward to, because that's the need of the hour. We talk of digital, and we need to transform our systems and our way of operating. And that is what I mean by digital transformation. So we are coming up with that. We have started 3 new programs in collaboration with Virginia Tech in artificial intelligence, data science, and cybersecurity. So bringing those professors to our campus, and they would be in our academic collaboration. They would be taking more than 7 courses across the 4 years program. This would really, I think, make a change to the way we view education and the delivery of it.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much. Pankaj, we are really short on time. Pankaj, over to you, please.
Very short. We have around 80,000 students studying with us in the entire group. Right. It's really challenging for everybody, pandemic, because, there are a lot of things. But believe me, I think the Professor Khosla pointed out that one thing, the One is the decision-making skill, and there are a lot of team player kind of a thing. I think that really plays a lot of support in this pandemic time. Considering the existing students' delivery, that's really perfect, as we have done all the exams, everything on time. And the considering the new admission, there were little challenges, but I think we have done decent this year. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect, perfect. Divakar, moving on to you quickly. How are we doing during the pandemic?
Okay. So, this is a very interesting, what you call, saying from this author named Mr. Timber Hawkeye had said, some time back. And I really want to bring it up. He had said that you can't calm the storm. So stop trying. What you can do is to calm yourself. And to be honest, like Professor Alka said and Dr. Pankaj said, many of the universities I know have adopted and changed and kind of morphed themselves very quickly into the digital ecosystem. So from a COVID perspective, from a pandemic perspective, they have been able to, based on what their entire landscape and contour was, they've been able to respond to it. And so has Jharkhand Lake City University. In fact, I think even before many of the people were reacting to it, because, and you know what, Prakshit, you cannot just overnight get into a digital framework. As we have all learned that being digital does not mean you just get the technology and systems in place. It means a mindset. So mindset cannot happen in one day. You need to have a mindset, and JLU, it's been years that we have been practicing, kind of a digital ecosystems and things and connected classrooms with the global, one of the best universities, the way that we work with the technology within our classrooms, everything. So that is there. But more important, I think, in the current times of pandemic, what we require is some very smart value-driven initiatives that we need to continue taking. I am of an opinion, and this is what JLU has also been doing. We do not need to do anything different. What we need to do is, and I think it is absolutely imperative, in these times, we need to be more compassionate. We need to be more open-minded with the students who are facing huge amount of trouble, with the parents may be facing. To be very, very clear that old metaphors, old stories, patterns, structures, everything which was happening, which was given, need not be relevant as of today. So again, as Atul was saying, that we need to start evolving pretty sharp now. That's number one. And it is, pandemic has been able to trigger it off, nudge it better. But I think it's again a process of illusion. That's a very important thing. So it requires a lot of compassion and calmness. And as JLU, as a university, I think we have been able to incorporate all those things very well. So it requires a focused leadership. And I believe that we have been able to offer it. And that is why even today, the students who have just taken admission, who are already in the first semesters, I mean, they feel comfortable. They feel as a part of it, and everybody's kind of, yearning and unleashing that when are the campuses going to open and we'll be physically in the campuses. So I think these have been times which have given us a great learning. But I think the age-old values, the way that universities, and Atul very rightly talked about in the beginning, has stood us in a good stead. And I think that continues to serve us well. Thank you.
Okay. Anil, while you answer this question, I'd also like you to talk about, the especially the recruitment strategies or the admission and selection criteria, during pandemic also. Please go ahead.
Sure, quickly. So I echo the same statement. This year's pandemic become, unprecedented time was more blessing in disguise for us. Okay, as we said that we were always ahead of a curve. So technology was always there. I think all of us agree that it's not that online teaching was not there in any of the university, but the problem happens how you make sure that equality and accessibility, what you're saying. I still feel there's a big gap in area. You can't go to the remote places where they don't have infrastructure and all, that will remain. But coming back to how we manage, so we already had, this online tutorials classes there for our students. Quickly, what we have done it, I think we have done a hybrid model. Okay, I think within 28 days and all, we have converted 25 classrooms. I'm talking about the internal student first, then I'll come to recruitment. All of them made it as a broadcast system. And since Shiv Nadar University is predominantly a residential campus, so we have already quite a large percentage of faculty inside. So it was a broadcasting model, because still talking from a laptop doesn't give that feeling, but the broadcasting model was giving a 360-degree view of a classroom. This one. Second, very importantly, I'm going back again, why it's a student-centric, I'm saying. Giving education delivery through this pandemic time, we all understand, but have anybody understand taking the same pattern of assessment? Will it varies in different subjects, programs? Is the student able to do that? So we have done a different surveys, and probably we found out, a faculty from a IR, a faculty from economics, or a faculty from engineering, they have actually created their own assessments, systems, tools. And we have done a survey where we found out, okay, these are the top faculties whose assessment everybody is liking, and this is a fair, and it's not creating a distress. And I agree with Professor Divakar, we have to be a little empathetical with the student in this current situation. So please understand, we evolved the whole assessment system, first of all, for students there, and then again created. And we were the first university to start the batches. I'm talking about the new students from the August itself. Now coming to the recruitment, we have actually had a process where we only recruit students from our internal examination, which is SNU SAT exam plus 12. But this year, because of this, we said, okay, for engineering, we have started admission taking from the JE percentile. So student doesn't have to go back again and give. We saw a lot of students who were aspired to go abroad, could not go. We have even taken the college board SAT scores, as an entry criteria. Okay. We have also incorporated the ACT, which is predominantly in the US market. Sorry. Why we have pushing student to again win, we have taken that, but definitely provided by our interview panel. So they make sure that, because we are little towards scholars students, so make sure that the meritorious based sanctity remains same. So we have quickly done. Third, but not the least, we do not want it, because all the tests used to happen to location through our partner. This we change into the remote proctoring test. Okay. So that a student at the comfort level of his home, wherever they are, they can give the examination and test. And all the process when I'm saying onboarding, when they're getting an enrollment from a candidate ID to become a student as an enrolled, it is automated. Okay. There were no physical foundation to come up and all. I think this is a great year for us, and we really overachieved our goals what we aspired to. So that's, we moved quick, fast.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's a lot of information for our educators also. Atul, you'll have the last word here. Could you tell us, how are we facing during the pandemic time?
I think most quality universities across India and in the world have moved towards technology solutions, and it's actually been superb in terms of doing synchronous lectures or adding asynchronous lectures, bringing in platforms like Coursera or edX or other MOOCs platforms into the universities, using other technology platforms like remote proctoring. I think these are pretty standard. I will talk about a couple of challenges that exist. First is around student engagement. How do you ensure that I, as a professor, am engaging my students? And one of the things which we've been working on very actively is using artificial intelligence for measuring student engagement. I'll give a couple of examples over here. And as a technologically savvy university, we have a 100-man team that's working on technology platforms. We are trying to understand the engagement index through the smiling index and whether students are engaging in terms of eye contact. So we measure every student today because they're looking into a webcam, whether they are engaged in the lecture or not. And I think we couldn't do those type of things in the physical world. We now pretty much understand whether the student is engaged or not. The second thing is engaging the student during the lecture. So we're bringing in a lot of gaming into the lectures. We're bringing in assessments into the lectures. So every lecture, for example, is now at least has 3 to 4 interventions of questions and polls and other things that are being brought in. And these all go automatically into the grade sheet. And that's some pretty much stuff. So student engagement, I think, is one thing. Okay. What I'd like to talk about is that it's easy to do synchronous learning, but you need to change the pedagogy to involve the student on projects. So we've worked very, very hard to ensure that the on-screen time of students is not more than 2 to 3 hours a day. So we've brought down a lecture from typically an hour and a half to 20 minutes, because the human mind cannot absorb more than 20 minutes of content. And the remaining time is actually students exploring themselves in their community and creating projects around that. And that's been very, very successful in terms of learning. So student engagement, I think, is one challenge, and we're trying to solve it that way. The second, I think, is happiness. At the end of the day, happy people are successful. Successful people need not be happy, Parikshit. Happiness is most critical for success. How do you bring happiness when students are not talking to each other? And I think that's one area that I'll encourage all educators, whether teachers in universities or schools. So we're trying to create communities of students. Of course, in this particular case, creating technology. How do you make sure that parents are talking to each other? How do you make sure that there are different groups of students talking to each other, not necessarily from the same class? How do you make sure that cultural events continue to happen? How do you make sure that you can even have, cooking sessions happening and having coffees over the internet? Of course, we're limited with technology, but bringing happiness into students' lives is extremely, extremely important, which I think is the second thing I would like to mention. So I think these are the two big challenges that we'll continue to face. And I think we're all evolving. But if there's one last thought I'd like to leave everyone, it's about happiness. So don't underestimate the happiness of a student. There's a lot of mental challenges happening with students, whether it's school students or university students and others. And we as educators need to figure out ways to engage them, involve them, get them to play, get them to do exercise, into the playground. How do we do that? On admissions, which you said, I had a blast, Parikshit. I love speaking to teachers and students, and we created a platform called Ideas That Matter, and we started talking to schools and teachers. So over the last 6 months, I've personally done more than 600 webinars. In fact, Hindustan Times gave me an award of the Webinar Man of India for whatever it's worth. I've touched more than 100,000 teachers over the last 6 months. It's been just phenomenal. We've been able to bring in amazing people in front of students or potential students. We've got 15 Nobel Prize winners, amazing speakers like Anupam Kher. Couldn't have happened in the real world, in the real sense. So I would say at one level, there's an opportunity. Technology brings that opportunity. At another level, there are challenges. So we all need to work towards mitigating those challenges and continuously working on the opportunities that exist. So I hope students can come back on campus. They're all waiting. Having said that, my hypothesis is that it's still a while to go. It's still at least 6 months to go. It's going to be minus plus. So one last thing I'll say on happiness is that we've tried to bring in a very strong buddy system among students, senior students, talking to junior students, especially the first year students. I think they're the most impacted, right? They don't know the university system. They're not sitting in class, in their home, and they're sort of lost. So how do we bring them into the university system? Last thought, we're also doing small 2-day, 3-day events. We're bringing some students into campus and say, okay, experience university life, then go back. So we're trying to sort of experiment with that a little bit. On research, which is again core for us, we've brought in all our PhD students on campus. I think that's a call that we've done. So by the way, research has really shot up. We have produced 3 times more research during COVID than what we did pre-COVID. So exciting times, challenging times, I would say.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Atul.
Parikshit, just give me a second. I want to add on to what Atul said. Before fame and fortune, I think the biggest F which comes is fun.
Absolutely.
And he's so right. And I think that's the most important message that we need to keep in mind as we navigate through this part.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry we've overshot. Dear participants, we've been very fortunate. We had Dr. Alka Mahajan from NMIMS, Professor Atul from Shulini, Anil, a very dear friend, Anil Kumar Nair from Shiv Nadar University. We had Professor Divakar Shukla from Jagran Lake University, Dr. Pankaj Sharma from SRM University, Sonipat. So we've been fortunate. I'm really happy that we could look at different perspectives. Okay, different perspectives on higher education. We talked about challenges. I'm sorry, I really wanted to talk a lot about NEP also, but within so much of time. We could only do so much. Hopefully, all of you got brilliant insights from our esteemed panelists. And don't worry, we'll keep bringing all of them back to you again and again for these lovely discussions. On behalf of the ICC community, I thank all my panelists. Thank you so much for spending such valuable time on a Sunday. And of course, I think now, I know the next word is going to be, there is no concept of a weekend or a Sunday, right? It's we work 24/7. And as Atul talked about maximization, right? So which is 24/7, let's just keep working.
You've been a brilliant moderator, Parikshit. The challenge has been you bring in 7-8 professors together. We love to speak, right? So you've been brilliant.
I second that. I second that, Parikshit. You have been a wonderful moderator and it's been a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Vaishnavi, over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So much participants. I think we can call it a day. We have overshot, I think, 20 minutes extra. Without Thanksgiving, I'll just kind of close the event. Thank you so much, speakers, participants. You've been with us since 8:45 a.m. in the morning. So it's a big thing. For all the current ICC Foundation participants, your assessment is also live. You can go to your ICC dashboard and give the assessment and take your certificates.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care. Be safe. All of you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.